Hey, Miller team, it's Miller time. Back again for another deep dive into this week's Toolbox Talk. And wow, there's some really important stuff in here. We're talking human trafficking awareness and how to stay safe with this chilly winter weather coming up. But before we get into that, I got to give a shout out to our top drivers of the week: Mike Olivero, Anthony Jaramillo, Carlos Baca, Adrian Ayala, and Andres Velas. Great job, guys. Really setting a great example for everyone.
Yeah, some seriously impressive work there. Now on to this week's Toolbox Talk. You know, one thing that really stuck with me was that statistic about distracted driving fatalities in Colorado. 718 deaths between 2012 and 2022. I mean, it's a lot of lives lost.
Yeah, it's a scary reminder that safety is no joke. And even just a quick distraction can lead to something really tragic. And speaking of things we need to be more aware of, let's talk about human trafficking. It's a tough topic for sure. But the Toolbox Talk really made me realize that this isn't just something that happens somewhere else.
Exactly. It's easy to think of it as a far-off problem, but human trafficking is happening right here in our communities. And it could even be happening in our industry.
It's a disturbing thought.
Yeah.
And it's not just limited to sex trafficking, right?
Right. We're talking forced labor in construction, landscaping, cleaning services, all fields that we work with every day.
Okay, wow. That's pretty unsettling. So the Toolbox Talk mentioned 3 main steps to prevent human trafficking in the workplace: communicating with coworkers, scrutinizing our supply chain, and recognizing the signs of a potential victim. But honestly, scrutinizing the entire supply chain sounds kind of overwhelming. Like, where would you even begin with that?
It is a complex issue, but it starts with asking the right questions, like where are our materials coming from? Who is making them? Are there any red flags that pop up when we're looking at the sourcing process? You know, these conversations might be a little uncomfortable at times, but they're so important for making sure that we are supporting ethical practices throughout the entire supply chain.
So it's all about being diligent and having those tough conversations sometimes. Now, what about recognizing the signs of a potential victim? The Toolbox Talk mentioned things like someone who seems fearful or restricted. But how can we know for sure without jumping to conclusions?
Yeah, it's definitely a delicate balance. You don't want to be suspicious of everyone, but if something feels off, like if someone consistently avoids making eye contact, or they have unexplained injuries, or maybe they're hesitant to talk about their living situation, these could be signs that something's not right, and it might be worth reporting. It's better to be safe than sorry.
And if we do suspect something, the National Human Trafficking Hotline is 1-888-373-7888. That's a number I'm going to make sure I have memorized. Speaking of being cautious, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about that new hands-free driving law. It goes into effect in Colorado on January 1, 2025. So I've heard some things about it, but what's the main takeaway here? No more touching our phones at all while driving.
Basically, yeah. The new law applies to all drivers in Colorado, no matter your age. It bans holding your phone while you're driving, unless you're safely pulled over to the side of the road.
That sounds pretty strict, but I guess it makes sense after we talked about those distracted driving statistics.
Yeah.
So what about using Bluetooth for calls or GPS? Is that still allowed?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Hands-free accessories are still allowed. The main thing is to avoid handling your phone directly while the car is moving.
Got it. Hands-free is the way to go. So the Toolbox Talk also mentioned some pretty serious consequences for breaking this law. I mean, even beyond the usual fines and points on your license.
Yeah, for Miller employees, breaking this law could mean losing your quarterly bonus or even facing termination. I mean, Miller is taking this really seriously, and for good reason. Distracted driving is just too risky.
That's definitely a clear message. Safety comes first. And speaking of staying safe, I noticed that winter weather advisory in the Toolbox Talk, they're predicting some really cold temperatures and maybe even some snow at the beginning of the week. So what should we keep in mind, especially given the kind of work that we do?
Well, the most important thing is to be prepared. Make sure you're layering up to stay warm. And it's always a good idea to have a winter emergency kit in your vehicle.
Oh yeah, good point. What about specific precautions on job sites? Is there anything we need to be extra cautious about when we're working in those conditions?
Yeah, for sure. Ice and snow, I mean, they can create some really dangerous conditions. So we got to be extra careful out there. Make sure you're wearing the right footwear for the conditions. Take your time when you're moving around. And always be on the lookout for any slipping hazards. And don't forget, communication is key. If you see something that seems unsafe or you have any concerns, let your team know.
Yeah, absolutely. Teamwork makes the dream work, right? Got to look out for each other. So before we wrap up, I just want to say again that this deep dive is really just a highlight reel of the Toolbox Talk.
Think of this deep dive like your cheat sheet, but the real gold is in the Toolbox Talk itself. It's got all those specific scenarios. and guidelines that apply to your everyday work.
So true. Everyone needs to read and sign the full document. It keeps us all on the same page and make sure we're up to date on all the safety protocols.
Exactly. It's about taking responsibility for our own safety and the safety of the people around us.
Couldn't said it better myself. We all play a part in building a safer and more ethical workplace.
You know, that brings up an interesting question. What actions can you take, both on the job and off the clock, to help create that kind of environment?
That's a good one. Definitely something for us all to think about. Well, thanks everyone for joining us for another Miller Time Deep Dive.
Stay warm out there, stay safe, and stay informed.
We'll catch you next time. And hey, Miller team, don't forget, read and sign that Toolbox talk. All the important stuff's in there.
Yeah, well said. It really is about being proactive and, staying in the loop.
For sure. Like, they say knowledge is power, but it's what we do with that knowledge that really makes all the difference.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, everyone, until next time, stay safe out there.
We'll see you next time for another round of Miller Time.